What is good, NBA fans? Welcome into another week of Dropping Dimes. I'm your host, Matt Knost, and we are here to talk about the second round of the NBA playoffs in full swing. Two series have two games under their belt. The other two series play game two tonight. And so far, it's been a lot of fun. It's been very interesting to see the adjustments that certain teams have made thus far, the differences from round one into round two, and how personnel changes and the defense changes, defensive schemes change along with it. There's a lot to discuss, so let's jump in. We'll go with the two games last night and discuss those series, and then we'll get into a look towards the two games tonight and a discussion of the previous of those two series that are both at one game apiece. So last night, to open the NBA doubleheader, we had the Bucks and the Celtics. Now, as a road team for both the series that have got two games under the belt thus far, your only job is to win one game on the road. And both teams did it in the opening game. And then the home teams adjusted and came back and took game two. And in that Celtics-Bucks game, there's a lot to take away from both sides. The Celtics came out and in the first half were just utterly lights out, especially from three. I mean, if you look at the statistical categories pretty much across the board for last night's game, Boston won just about everything. I think free throws are the only thing that the Bucks got more of, and that's largely due in part thanks to Giannis barreling into the lane. But the Celtics, attempted almost double the threes, if not double the threes that the Bucks took. But I mean, the Celtics hit 20 and the Bucks only, shot 18. And that's the biggest difference in the game. As Stan Van Gundy pointed out during the broadcast, Milwaukee crushed him in points in the paint. And that could be a worrying sign for the Celtics because you live by the three, you die by the three. And if you're content to settle for those shots and you're having a night where you're just not hitting them as much, and Milwaukee can get to the other area on the floor that you want to be shooting from such a high percentage of getting their points, that could spell doom for you in another game. But the Celtics, more rebounds, more assists, more steals. They tied on blocks. They committed fewer turnovers. They just led in all statistical categories. And it's really like that first half is when they got out to a huge lead. The Bucks came back in the third quarter, and then the Celtics closed it out. But for the Bucks, Middleton is going to be out. Nothing has changed. He's going to miss the entirety of this series. Budenholzer was asked last night for an update on the status and said nothing new has come to light. So the original timeline is still going to stay, and the original timeline keeps him out of this series entirely. So the Bucks need to get someone else to show up. Now, Drew had a decent game. It wasn't a good game or a great game, but it was a decent game. He didn't shoot particularly well, 7 of 20 from the floor and 1 of 6 from three. He got to the line 4 times, 4 boards, 7 assists, 2 steals, but with 3 turnovers. And, that's not bad. But Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton are, the next 2 best players as far as getting you some buckets. So you need Lopez, who only attempted 2 shots, to get more involved in the offense overall. And I think, a lot of people need to be a little bit more involved in the offense. Although when Giannis shoots 27 times and Drew shoots 20 times, there's not a lot of oxygen left in the room for a bunch of other players. Just Drew at 7 for 20. And the fact that Boston is just content to shoot those threes, and it's not a bad thing. And credit to Boston. I think the difference too between the first half and the second half, the first half looked like the team they became the second part of the season. And then especially in that third quarter, it looked like who they were in November and December, where we're just settling for isolation plays or early in the shot clock threes when maybe your rebounders and whatnot aren't set. And the offense changed, the complexion of it changed entirely. Although Jaylen Brown came up and was like favoring a hamstring. I think it was towards the end of the third. So perhaps him having tweaked something was slowing him down. But if Boston's offense in game 3 looks like it did in the first half of this game, they're going to be a handful because they reverted back to more of that in the fourth as well. You just don't want to see it in the third because that's just not for the style of what they have, the player and personnel. It makes more sense to do what they did in the second half of the season, which arguably was one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NBA. And it's move the ball, set picks, come off screens, zip the ball around until you find the open man. And one nice thing for Boston is Marcus Smart goes out and Grant Williams comes in. And man, he was just a spark plug, flying around, getting offensive rebounds, D'ing up Giannis really well, shooting wide open threes, which he does well. But anything, he was a plug and play. What do you need me to do? Do we, be a stout defender? Not a problem. Be a pest on the offensive boards? You got it. You know, a nice outlet valve for the offense? Not a problem. It was good to see the growth from, Williams and other young Celtics players stepping up. Both teams have a decent amount of depth. But with Middleton out, it's just you need to rely on a second shooter, and sometimes Drew can be that, and sometimes Drew isn't. And if Drew isn't, someone else, please. And I think, Lopez, you need to get him more involved in the offense. 2 shots is just not nearly enough. You're asking way too much of Giannis in this because he's going to have to put these guys on his back, and he's more than willing to do it. But like at the end of the third quarter, he was already tired. He got that delay of game where got the rebound and started walking up the court with the ball and then threw it behind him, and they called the delay of game. But he looked labored as he's walking, and there was a full quarter to go. And you don't want to gas him entirely. I realize Giannis is not going to complain, and he's going to do everything he can because he's fantastic. I think that's why we all like Giannis. He doesn't talk a lot of shit. Like, he'll mean mug every once and again, but basically he is just there to compete and to win. Even when he commits like a blatant offensive foul barreling into somebody, it's rare to see him complain to the degree that other players would look at the ref and be like, what? What is this? How is this a foul? And you're like, it's clearly a foul. Sometimes he gets called for it. Sometimes he doesn't. He gets the liberal whistle on that a decent amount. And perhaps he knows that I shouldn't complain. But it's, watching the game, it's like if Giannis doesn't get this going right now, I don't think the Bucks have a snowball's chance in hell of even competing. Because I'm not sure at this point I trust anybody else. Like if they had someone else, especially coming off the bench, like a solid 6-man. So when you get him some rest, that's what Middleton would do. You stagger their minutes, and you can go out there in Middleton and run the second unit. And then we'll get you a little bit of rest, put Giannis back out there, and then we'll get you back out and get our starting core out there. But just to have somebody, another potent offensive punch. But it really came down to the threes. Boston hit 20 of them in that game. It's a huge disparity between the two teams. And Milwaukee has designed their defense over the past few seasons. It's just like, we'll give you the three, we're not giving you the paint. And it's worked. And it very well could work again 3 more times in this series. They just need to get somebody else to step up. But it was, this is going to be a nice slugfest of a series. I don't know that we're going to see another 20-plus point win for one of the teams, just because both defenses are really good. Boston was just unconscious in the first half, and Milwaukee couldn't answer, and they ran up a huge score. But I am looking forward to seeing the adjustments that each team makes come Friday for game threes. But Milwaukee did what it needed to do, which is win 1 of 2. So now they take it back to Milwaukee, and Boston's job is now to win 1 of 2. And let's see if either side can push the other, and we end up with a 7-game series, which is my hope. Let's get as many games as we possibly can in there. So we'll move over to the other game of the night, excuse me, which was another absolute classic again. Game 1, Memphis could have won that on a Ja layup late in the game. It was an amazing opening game. Game 2, it looked like Golden State will be able to hold serve and take both of these games. And Memphis did not go quietly into that night. And they fought through it. And it came down to Ja once again, just putting the team on his back and getting buckets late. And a nice feather in the cap for Ja is he was hitting his threes last night, which, the Warriors are more than happy to give him for the time being until he consistently makes those. You gotta, live with the strategy of, you're not a good 3-point shooter, we're going to let you have those. But perhaps he's the type of player that lives for the moment, and as the stage gets bigger and more eyes are on him, that he locks in even a little bit more. It's really impressive to watch. Now, let's get to the big brouhaha from the game, which is the Dillon Brooks foul on Gary Payton II, Young Glove, as he's nicknamed, or as his parents, I believe, voted to nickname him. So GP is going down the court. He's going up for a layup. Dillon Brooks comes in and doesn't even really make a play on the ball and just swipes at him and knocks him out of the air. It hits him in the head, knocks him to the ground. Dillon Brooks immediately gets a flagrant 2 and is tossed from the game. GP has to he hits 1 of 2 free throws, and then he is subbed out of the game and immediately taken back into the back for x-rays. And he is, last I heard, scheduled for an MRI, but I've also heard that he's got a fractured elbow, which means more than likely Gary Payton is done for the playoffs. And that sucks. It was a foul that, maybe 20, 30 years ago in the NBA was just a playoff foul. But now it's the players in the air and unprotected. Don't take a fucking swipe at him. You can do something like this, which is take him out of the playoffs. Potentially, you could end someone's career by doing that. And it's not as though you were going for the ball. You were just going to foul him. And I realize it's a contested game, and I can't imagine that Dillon Brooks intended to shatter his elbow and knock him out for the playoffs. But that is the outcome of his actions. And then now what's going to happen to Dillon Brooks? The NBA is assessing the situation. I'd assume he gets minimum 1-game suspension. The worst possible outcome, I think, would be a 2-game suspension. But, given Grayson Allen's foul on Alex Caruso was, in my opinion, more malicious than this, I think it's a 1-game suspension. And shit, right after that play, Draymond then gets elbowed in the eye and needs stitches, and it was back-to-back plays. And you're like, Jesus Christ, this game is going to be brutal. But the GP Dylan Brooks, I mean, Memphis is already down. Going to this, once Dylan Brooks gets tossed, Desmond Bane didn't look right in game 1, and then, come to find out that he's got back pain, and you could kind of see it. He didn't make a shot until, I want to say it was late in the third. It was a 3-point shot where he got, I believe it was an offensive rebound, and he receded back out past the 3-point line and took a quick shot, and it went in. And I'm about 99% certain that was his first bucket of the game. So if you don't have Dylan Brooks in the next one and Desmond Bane isn't right, who, in my opinion, Desmond Bane was their best player in the opening series. He was just consistent. He'd get you a bucket whenever you needed it, and he was shooting it efficiently, making correct choices predominantly when he had the ball. So now you're saying, okay, Ja and Jaren Jackson Jr., you have to do all the heavy lifting for this team, which Ja is up for it. But the problem with relying on Jaren Jackson, who's a really good player, is he's also prone to committing stupid fouls and getting himself, benched because you have to protect him from fouling out. So there could be stretches in game 3, if Dylan Brooks' suspension is only 1 game, where it's like Ja and whether or not Desmond Bane's back is anywhere near healthy. But we're going to say, okay, Brandon Clark, we know that you've had a couple really good games so far in the playoffs, but we need you to step up. And last night, like Zaire Williams hit some big threes, and Tyus Jones, guys that you like, but in these big high leverage moments, you're just unsure exactly what you're going to get from them. And you're going to have to rely on them if you want to be able to contend with the Warriors in San Francisco. It's entirely possible. I think on some level, Memphis almost prefers to be on the road to shut down the other crowd. At least Ja does. And he's going to step up in the moment. And now with the Warriors losing GP, it hurts them in this series. But if they move forward, I think it really kills them against Phoenix. But anyway, in regards to this series, so it's weird when you're watching these games, but Clay still doesn't look remotely like himself. I mean, in the last game, he missed those 2 clutch free throws. He really just needed to make 1 to make it a 2-point game. And that way, all they have to really do is defend against the 3 and force John to a layup, which is what he went for anyway. But when he missed both, and then in this game, what did he go? 5 for 17? And the weird thing is, Clay, for the longest time, was a player that every time he went up, more often than not, the shot looked good. Even if it rimmed out, it looked good. And last night watching it, every time he went up, I was like, that doesn't look good. And when he hit 5 of them, a couple of those 5, I was surprised because the shot just didn't look like it was going in. And it's so weird when you're watching that from Clay. And if a guy's going to take 17 shots and he's just not himself, that's the other thing. The Warriors, killed themselves a couple different times, but it's a bunch of things that they've always done, which is they turn the ball over too much. That's been the Warriors' song and dance since they really became this current iteration of the Warriors over the past 7 years or so. It's Warriors, and man, they turn the ball over a lot, and you walk away with that feeling from a lot of games. But because they shoot so well, it can erase that sentiment from your mind at times. And in this one, there were several, especially from Curry, like that one where he was on the right wing and he went to throw it back to the middle. And Xavier Tillman was already somewhat in the passing lane, and he only had to take a half step and intercepted it and then ran coast to coast. And I'm just not sure what Curry, at the very least, throw a bounce pass there. Yeah, I know it's easy for me to sit here after the fact, not operating in that game speed, under the lights, the pressure, the national TV audience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he had that. He had like a lazy lob pass trying to get it over two defenders, and the first one just jumped up and snatched it out of the air. Like it had no chance. And the Warriors had several of those last night where like, I'm not sure where you were intending that to go. That and a few times settling for a three when you had no need for it, when you easily could have dribbled in and gotten into 5-6 feet of the paint, or not of the paint, pardon me, of the bucket, and gotten an easy two. And I realize it's three and key, but in essence, they could have, like, there were a couple that were just like, you have all the defenders because it was a skip pass to the weak side. There isn't a defender within 10 feet of you. It seems the more prudent, considering how okay you've been shooting from three tonight, perhaps get in, because like when they went cold, what got them back into the game were layups and dunks. I think it was in the third quarter, Jordan Poole went layup and dunk, and then the next possession down, Wiggins dunked it in traffic. And it's just like they have been missing three after three after three. And I'm watching this going, get the ball down and low. Should they sub in Kuminga just to get somebody in there to play make and force a little bit of the pressure down into the paint? But once they started driving in, then the defense had to collapse and respect that drive. And now you can kick out to wide open threes, and they started hitting their threes again. But same for, Curry. He started driving. He got that toilet bowl layup that went in, but he got a couple like closer into a floater. Like him and Ja traded floaters back and forth in the second half at one point, and just to get him into a rhythm. And then after that, like he hit a wide open three. And I don't know. There are just times where they're just like, yeah, we shoot threes, and they continue to shoot threes, and you're not hitting it. It's just like, it seems like a recipe for failure if you're going to settle. Yes, you are a good 3-point shooting team, but for Christ's sakes, it's good to see the ball go in the hoop every once and again. And, they got down at numerous points. I think the largest lead that Memphis had last night was 11 points. And the biggest lead for Golden State was 4. So, I mean, Memphis is to lose for a decent portion of the game, especially to open up. Memphis came out guns blazing from the jump. Jobs hot from three. They go out to an early lead. And you knew Golden State was going to climb back in. But it was at various points in the second half, it was so good where they're just trading bucket after bucket, and they're getting it to, 1 point or 2 points over and over and over again. But Golden State is just like, those turnovers are going to bite you in the ass. And if I'm Golden State, I'm fine with the Zaire Williams of the world taking those threes. That's fine. Prove to me that we need to respect it. You should still be playing defense, which they did. But if we got to leave somebody open, all right, this young guy, prove to me that you got it. But it was a hell of a game. That's 2 now excellent games. I mean, Memphis is slowly becoming the most exciting team in these playoffs. They're never out of it. They continue to fight. They just have this will, spirit, and determination that is a big fat middle finger to whoever their opponent is of we're not afraid of you. We don't care what you've done or who you are. You don't know how good we are, and we're about to, prove it to you. And a lot of credit to Tyler Jenkins for making solid adjustments on rotations of what I mean. Steven Adams, who's a staple of the lineup, just basically been forced to the bench in the playoffs, and I think it was the wise decision. They're running into athletic teams that can shoot threes, and if Stevens is out there, and suddenly you're playing 4-on-5 on offense unless you're getting him for lobs, and you're going up against these high firepowers like the Warriors. You need to be able to match shot for shot. So this next game without Dylan Brooks is going to be a big test. And we'll see. But Memphis has stepped up to every single single one of these. Rashawn in the chat says Steven Adams has COVID. Yeah, but that being said, in the previous series, it became obvious that Stevens isn't going to be the right guy that we need out there. And it's nothing personally against him, but you're going to get more athleticism out of a couple other guys, and it gives you more flexibility for matchups and offensive punch. And I think that is just going to continue. Now, if they move on to take on the Suns, well, having another defender out there that can do something against DeAndre Ayton, which is what the Mavs are running into, you might be able to see him for certain spells out on the court. But right now, because Golden State doesn't have some massive interior presence, although they're winning the boards, which has been an Achilles heel of theirs. But you don't have to worry about it as much. You're not going to make substitution patterns based on whether or not Looney is playing. Whereas if they move on, Ayton is going to be someone that you have to respect. Just look at what the Mavs are having to deal with now. But I can't wait for game 3. This is easily my favorite series of the second round. It's somebody who has no dog in any of these fights just for sheer watchability. It's Golden State and Memphis. This series is a lot of fun. Hopefully every one of these games comes down to the last 2 minutes of the game, and they've been fighting, and we've got lead changes, up by 1, up by 2, whatever. And when they were trading blows last night, it was fantastic. It's like one side hits a 3, the other side comes down, hits a 3. They get a layup, we get a dunk. And it's just anything you can do, I can do better. Back and forth and back and forth. Just excellent to watch. I loved every second of it. I can't wait. Now, I look forward to tonight's 2 matchups. We will open with Philly and the Heat. And last I saw, Embiid potentially comes back game 3-4, but I haven't checked that injury status update since game 1. So it's been 48 hours. I don't know if there's been any shift in that 48 hours. If it's been guaranteed certainty that he's going to play on this date, or they're still kind of playing it by ear, I'm not sure. But that last one, I mean, Philly takes the lead going into the half by 1. And I was as shocked as anybody. Miami got out to an early lead, and I was like, there we go. All right. They're just going to build up a double-digit lead and hold on to it the rest of the game, maybe build upon it. And their defense is going to be strong enough to where they'll give up a bucket every once and again, but in no way are they going to let Philly back into this game. I mean, it's already over. very early in the game. I was like, nail in the coffin, done already. Because I don't believe in Harden in the slightest. It's like, dude, how many times have we seen once he gets down by a certain, number of points, he just kind of lazily goes through the motions the rest of the game. And, in the second quarter, especially, that Philly team was like, that's not who we are. We are going to fight. And we can survive without Embiid. We're going to start DeAndre Jordan. Doc being defensive after the game, be like, we're going to start him again in game 2. It's like, all right, man, you know more about coaching and strategy than I do, but I've also watched DeAndre Jordan over the past couple seasons, and he looks washed, flat out. But Philly holding strong, took a 1-point lead going into the half, and you're like, all right, they have made this a game. This is suddenly going to be interesting. And then the third quarter begins, and the depth of Miami just proved out. Tyler Hero and Bam both had good games. And, they got solid to decent games from Jimmy and PJ and Gabe Vincent. It's not like they blew the doors off, but they did have 5 guys with double digits. So it's not bad. And they didn't shoot particularly well, Miami, from 3 but at the same time, Philly shot even worse from 3 on a higher volume. Actually, pardon me. Miami had a higher volume, but Philly shot even worse. They were content to keep settling for threes, even though they weren't going down, but it's part of the design of who they are. But for Philly, when you're watching, it was like basically Tobias showed up. Maxey had a pretty good game. And then James Harden had another James Harden. When Jalen Rose basically said, you need to stop having these tour date games where it's 4-12, 4-16, 5-17, whatever. He had a tour date game last night. Or not last night, but 2 nights ago. And is he going to have another tour date game again tonight? Because Tobias answered the call. It's like, we need somebody to step up here, and he stepped up. And you would hope that Harden, at the very least, would be able to initiate a bunch of the offense. And, he's like the number of assist games. He's got the high water mark for the Sixers, and he didn't join them until after the trade deadline, where at the game where he leads the team with the number of assists, and that number getting consistently into the double digits is what he proved out like he could do. And he had 5 assists last night. So if you're not going to be effective from the field, he shot 5 of 13 and 2 of 7 from 3. You're not getting the call to get to the free throw line, even though you're complaining like you're still a superstar. You're just not. You're not playing like it. You look slow. You don't have that first step and drive and the athleticism to blow past anybody like you used to. And if the step back 3 isn't falling, then I don't know what the hell his offense is anymore. But at the very least, teams still have to respect you, and you could be a playmaker. To end up with only 5 assists, it's like, I'm not sure what your utility out there is. And on top of that, you had 5 turnovers. So your assist to turnover ratio is 1-to-1. That's dog shit. And I mean, if Embiid is going to be out, for any kind of extended period, if Philly wants to have a shot in this series, well, it looks like it's got to be Harris and Maxey doing all the lifting, and Harden just kind of standing around and watching the offense go by him. Because right now, to see this version of him, it's amazing how quickly he fell off. Like, it's a slot receiver. Once they lose their step, they're out of the NFL. Look at Steve Smith, the premier slot receiver. And then once he couldn't get that little bit of breakaway from guys, he was out of the league in 2 years. And Harden has already kind of succumbed to that. He's not even near the player he was last year. And the whole, I need to get out of Brooklyn, and this is a better situation for me, and this is where I always wanted to go. You don't seem to be playing like it. And I don't want to pile on the guy. I mean, if you've watched or listened to this show long enough, you know that I'm not the biggest Harden fan. But before, it was because he was manipulating the rules to get free throws when he's proven to be a better player than that. And he doesn't need that nonsense to game the rules so you get free throws. And the moniker of free throw merchants for him and Embiid, I wish I came up with that, because I think that's very true. Embiid is literally the largest flopper just by sheer size of the individual. But like, Philly is the team that I want to watch the least right now, because it's frustrating to watch as somebody that just wants to watch good basketball. Like, if you put in Embiid into last night's game with the Warriors and Memphis, and that was a physical game, guys weren't getting a bunch of different calls, and they were still complaining, but it wasn't like they're stopping to yell at the refs or something like that. They're just like, shit, I'm not getting that call tonight. I need to keep playing on. And if it was Embiid in there, he would have flopped to the ground, I would say minimum 10 times. Minimum. It's like, how is that fun to watch? And then you add Harden to this mix. It's like, man, this team is just trying to bait the refs into calling fouls at all times. It's just not fun to watch. So for that reason and that reason alone, I'm rooting against him. I do not want to see that type of behavior rewarded. It's like a petulant child. It's like, no, just because you whine and complain doesn't mean, the squeaky wheel is not getting grease on this one. And on the flip side, for, Miami, you don't even know who's going to have the best game tonight. That's part of the design of this team. And it's also what scares me when I watch them, and why a lot of people are uncertain as to whether or not Miami can make the finals, let alone win a championship. It's like, who's consistently their best player during these playoffs? I'm not sure, because you haven't gotten Lowry back. Butler had an okay game the last game, but Bam and Hero went off. But you could have in tonight's game, it's like Bam and Hero don't go off, but Butler and some combination of Strus and Vincent and Oladipo go off. Like, they have depth, and depth that can surprise you. It's like all of a sudden Caleb Martin has 15 points, and you're like, man, good for them. And it's a testament to the training staff, the coaching staff, finding guys, these gems that nobody else does, and coaching them up to a degree where you can rely on them in these moments where you need them most. Where you lose a Kyle Lowry, and suddenly several guys whose names I had never heard before this season, the Vincent, Caleb Martin, Max Strus, Yurtseven, are able to step up and fill the void. It's really impressive, but that kind of uncertainty as to who the actual, hey, we need a bucket, who's getting it? The default, I think, would still be on some level Jimmy, but Jimmy, I love Jimmy for his intensity and the fact that he will fly into the lane and take the contact, and he is intense and demands as much out of himself as he does his teammates. It fits what Miami wants from their players. I mean, beautiful. That whole hashtag heat culture, there's a tremendous amount of truth in that. And, Butler fits that mold really well. And you trust in Spo because Spo is one of the best coaches in the game. But that uncertainty is just like, I don't know. I still clearly am picking Miami to win this series. And even when Embiid gets back, he's going to be tentative early on. He'll be wearing a face mask, but he'll still be tentative. And who knows if there's a swollen portion of the eye still to deal with, but it's going to be tender for quite a while as it heals. I haven't heard any mention of surgery, so he's not going to have surgery on it. Perhaps the break either wasn't bad enough or surgery would take him out for too long, so he's unwilling to do it because he doesn't want to miss this opportunity. But even when they get him back, just Philly, I don't think they can match tit for tat what Miami can throw at him. Plus Miami's defense. I love the full court press. Leave it to Miami to just, I mean, when they rolled that out in game one, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. I wish more teams would do this. After watching Alvarado get Chris Paul, the point guard, to commit several backcourt violations, which is a rarity to see in the NBA, just because nobody picks up that. They don't contest that hard in the backcourt. But to see Miami roll out a fucking full court press was just chef's kiss. Just, I love it. So, I mean, Miami, I think, takes tonight. Maybe Philly takes game 3. Miami takes game 4. Then Miami takes game 5. And we got a 4-1. Best case for Philly, I think, is 4-2. But 4-1 to me seems like the natural outcome for this. And then Philly falls into turmoil once again. And Doc is thrown under the bus. And it becomes a question of, do we sign Harden to the max extension? They're kind of over a barrel, but no chance. There's no way Harden's worth $45 million a year, starting, no less, and escalating to, if it's a 4-year deal, what, mid to upper 50s by the end? Like, there's no chance whatsoever that he is worth that. I think I'd be comfortable with Harden in the 18 to 20 million range. That seems like a reasonable for what he gives you on the court. But I don't know. I mean, Philly has so many questions. I feel bad for the fan base. But anyway, moving on to tonight's game 2, which is Dallas and Phoenix. And this is another good series. I think there are 3 good series, and then there's the Miami and Philly one. So Phoenix and Dallas, after the game, Jason Kidd was like, oh man, somebody needs to step up and help Doncic. And if you were just to look at the sheet at the end and look at the box score, you're like, yeah, Jalen Brunson didn't have a good game, and nobody, Dinwiddie didn't have a good game, and not to the degree that Luka did, who shot 15 of 30, 4 of 11 from 3, had a 45-point triple-double. It's 40-something or other point triple-double. And 30 shots is a lot, but when you're hitting 50% of them, you can't complain. It's just there were several times where he got deep into the paint and suddenly ran into a wall, and he's trying to do the footwork that he's excellent at, but they're not biting on all the different fakes. And normally, like Luka against the center is actually surprisingly a good matchup for Luka. He toasts centers pretty consistently in the league, but Ayton is a slight cut above. And you could see it during the games. It's like, this isn't working like it normally does. So then Luka would pass out to the wing, and the wing would immediately pass it back to Luka. But it was a lot of stagnation, which happens within the Mavericks offense at times. You have a distinctly heliocentric player where the offense is built entirely around you determine everything that we do. And it'd be interesting to see what kind of success that they get out of that long term, because on the one hand, like these other guys didn't have good games, but not all of them are designed to be spot up shooters. Several can function in that role, but I think if you just got a little 2 and 3 man game between some of his other guards and wings, you'd open up a little bit more of the possibilities as opposed to watching Luka crab dribble for 12 seconds of the shot clock as he's slowly, methodically figuring out what exactly he's going to do. And I mean, it's you kind of, you take the good with the bad with Luka, and that is part of the design of who he is as a player. But watching it at times, I felt it was a little bit much to throw the other teammates under the bus, saying, "Well, somebody else needs to step up." It's like watching that game. I'm not sure that type of gameplay is going to be able to work against the Suns, who have a really good defense. So perhaps slightly adjusting how much you're holding onto the ball and getting a little bit more motion in the offense to keep the defense honest would probably open up more avenues for you. And on the flip side for Phoenix, because they have so many weapons, Dallas has to pick their poison as to what exactly they're going to play defense on. Because on pick and rolls, they were sending the help defender over onto when Devin Booker's running pick and rolls, they were sending a help defender over to shut him down, to try and corral him, to stop him from getting an open three or a mid-ranger from roughly the elbow-ish in that area, general area, because he's great at both. So they're sending that help defender, and depending on who he ran the pick and roll with, if it's Ayton rolling to the rim, well, he hit him on the lob several times. And the difference between him and Gobert in the previous series is Ayton's a better athlete and a better shooter. So you have to respect him from more areas on the court than you do someone like Gobert. I'm not saying Gobert is bad, but I prefer to have Ayton personally of those two centers. It's not even close to me. Gobert's a better defender. But because of his limitations on offense, you can take advantage of that. And I think Ayton still provides a solid enough defensive presence, and then you add into it his offense, and that to me is a more well-rounded player. But Booker was finding lobs to that, or if then they sent a second defender off to stop the lob to Ayton, well, now you have potentially, minimum one shooter open on the 3-point arc. Sometimes there was like 1.5, somebody's defender was hedging towards the paint a little bit too much. It's still kind of close enough to get back and recover, but it was enough to where, Phoenix is pinging the ball around and they're looking for best available shot as opposed to we need to get it to, one or two specific guys. It's like if you're on the court, you need to shoot. They really believe in that philosophy. So I'm curious as to what the adjustment for tonight's game on that one is. Are they still going to double Booker on every one of these pick and rolls? Or are they just going to trust their defender so they're not having to shift their defense over and then leaving a 3-point shooter on the arc open? Because Cam Johnson had a nice game. but he can get hot from three. Mikal Bridges can get hot from three. There's still playoff Crowder, who every once and again can look like the best three-point shooter out there. Hasn't done it as much this playoffs, but we've seen him the 2 previous years where suddenly Jay Crowder gets hot and can destroy a team practically on his own. Chris Paul can get hot from three, and Booker can as well. But if he's getting doubled, he's not going to have as many open looks as he would have before. But it's a, you know, who do you leave open in this situation? And if I'm Dallas, I think to kind of try and match firepower, I'd play Kleba even more minutes than he's playing right now. The shooting woes that he had for the last like 15, 20 games of the season have evaporated, and he's gone back to shooting really well from three. He's actually even stepped up his 3-point shooting. He went 5 of 8 in the last game. And that's obviously, you can't rely on anybody going consistently 5 of 8 because they would be the greatest 3-point shooter of all time if that was, their average. But in the playoffs, he's finally reverted back to the guy that we saw like last season, where he was a distinct threat from three. And I think you need to have him out there. You're going to sacrifice, try not to get him in foul trouble. And maybe you're just saying to yourself, you know what? We're going to let Aiden eat. He went 12 of 20 in that last game. We'll sacrifice the twos to save on the threes, but then we're going to match firepower by having Kleba run more minutes and maybe have, some combination lineup out there of Doncic, Brunson, Smith, Bullock, Dinwiddie, or Kleba. And one of those 6 is sitting, but to go with a more stretched lineup to try and match the firepower of Phoenix a little bit and still maintain a little bit of the defensive identity that you have. But, the adjustments on this one for Dallas, I'm intrigued by to see by the end of the game, what the playing time ends up being. And I was skeptical about Jason Kidd coming into the season because there was no previous evidence of him being a good coach to this degree. When he was a player, you're like, he's like having a coach out on the floor, and he was. So you assumed when he made the transition, he'll be a good coach because he already sees the game like a coach and has been able to relate to his previous teammates, how to orchestrate an offense, and he got, teams to the finals in the past and didn't win a chip. He wasn't the best player on that championship Mavericks team, but he did win a chip. And this year, completely changing the identity of the team to worry about defense, whereas in the past, it was like, yeah, we don't give a shit. We're just going to score a bunch of points. And to rely on that defense. And that's why you have somebody like Powell out there. It's a good defender. But if he's not going to keep teams honest from various points on the floor like Kleba will, I think I'd sacrifice a little bit of that defensive identity to get the offensive firepower. Now, a case could be made that Kidd knows, well, we need to be playing Kleba in the rotations that he's doing right now because that is the best way to take advantage of his skill set and his abilities and give him some rest, but to find good matchups. And it's not like, Phoenix blew the doors off of it. It was a close game until, very late in the game. Ultimately, it was a 7-point win, but it was closer than that late in the game. So while this hasn't been as close as Golden State and Memphis, there is a chance that Dallas comes in here tonight and steals one from Phoenix. I mean, Phoenix went from regular season juggernaut and a team that, like, this is one of the elite regular season teams that we've seen in since the Warriors' heyday. And now, like, after that Pelican series, there might be a little bit of cracks in the foundation. I don't know. We'll see. Phoenix comes out and wins games too. Well, now they're basically stealing the thunder from that argument, if that's a phrase. but I'll be intrigued to see the adjustments they make. But Phoenix played that one really well. DeAndre looked solid as can be, and Booker ended up having to pass out of more situations, but he was a willing passer and he was good at finding guys. All right, I'm going to jump into the chat really quickly, and then we're going to close this one up today. So we'll start at the very top. Jeremy Bauer says the Dylan Brooks play on GP was dirty. I think everybody agrees with that, outside of maybe Dylan Brooks' parents. Yuri McGarley says, hello, everyone. Riley Pengrass says, Giannis needed to try and facilitate the ball more. Guy came out shooting too much off the start in the game. Not going to beat Boston like that. Yeah, but they took game one. And not to say that he couldn't make adjustment. Let's see, a little bit of inner chat talk. Jake Cleveland says, I think the 76ers are missing Seth Curry in this matchup. Yeah, they could use another shooter out there. Rashawn Robinson said the Warriors were giving up layups. Yeah, they don't have... There's no real interior presence. I mean, you're relying on Draymond as your center, and he had a couple good ones. Like Ja went barreling into the lane, and Draymond went straight up in the air. In the regular season, you might get that foul call, but in the playoffs, that is not a foul, and rightly so. I'm glad the officials didn't call it. Because Ja gets legitimately playoff fouled on other ones, and rightly gets those calls. And the thing I like about Ja is he takes some serious hits, and only every once and again will you see him turn to an official and say, like, really? Come on. Instead, just like usually might give like a glance or something, and you see a slight look of disgust, but he just keeps motoring, keeps going. It's in. I am envious of Memphis fans because you guys have a boatload of players that are really fun. I like Jaren Jackson. I wish he'd cut down on the fouls. Desmond Bane, I think is great. Dylan Brooks, I've never been a fan. I just think he shoots the ball too fucking much. And it's good to have irrational confidence. And there are other times where you're hurting your team at this point. So a little more inter chat discussion. Oh, it's good to see though. See, Daniel Savo says the Grizzlies have nothing to lose. They were supposed to be this good a few seasons down the line, not now. Why not show up and show out against the Warriors? Yeah, I think if this were last year, I would agree. But to build upon and then have the second best record in the regular season and slowly creating this identity of we're not just some young upstarts. We're here. We're a legitimate team. I'm not sure that narrative. It's not like they're playing fully with house money. If they were the Pelicans, this season, and they come in through the play-in game like they did last year, and then did all this, now you're playing with house money, and I would agree with that sentiment. Marcus Driscoll says Riley sagging off Draymond is a trap. You give him great passing lanes and all the time in the world, and he carves you up. All right. So some discussion about Steven Adams, whether or not he can make an impact in this series. I still think he'll get spot minutes, but at best. Steven Salas says Ja Morant gets away with the biggest carries every time. There are moments where, like when he does a change of direction and he flat out palms and flips the ball over, 100%. But I can think of worse carries. Isaiah Thomas, to me, could be the worst carrier I've ever seen. I'm talking about Boston Isaiah Thomas. When Fred Hoiberg said upset when the Bulls are losing to him in the playoffs and be like, look, he's a great player, but it's kind of impossible to defend when he's able to carry the ball like he does. And you can, I agreed. I agreed in the moment. It's like, hell yeah. When you're watching this, you can go and find it. There are clips where he'll start running with the ball. He'll like turn a corner with the ball and he's got it resting on his hands and he literally takes 5 steps. But because his legs are so small, they're like 5 quick steps, but it's still 5 steps. And you're like, he's just running with the ball. Ja does have those every once and again. There was 2, maybe 3 last night. We're like, well, that's a liberal, where it's just a flat out, like completely pivoting his direction, picking the ball up and depositing it over. But I think because his mastery is so strong, the rest of the time, refs are willing to turn a blind eye to it. And plus, what is and isn't a carry is slowly gotten slightly gray over the years. All right. Tons of action in the chat. And it's not really pertinent to the show. Not saying it's not basketball pertinent, it is, but they're talking about like Beal going to the Sixers. Shouldn't be Beal, maybe Levine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a discussion for another day, even though I did bring up the question marks for the Sixers going forward. And I don't even want to see Levine's name printed there because that hurts. His quotes have not been good in the slightest. I'm not happy about it. If he does decide to leave, hopefully he opts for a trade, a sign and trade. That sucks that might be the best case scenario. Anyway, that is it for Dropping Dimes today. Look forward to tonight's action. Can't wait for those games, and should be quite interesting. And thank you to everybody that joined in the chat. Tons of different people. Quite a few viewers. I appreciate everybody joining today. You can follow me at Matt Knost on Twitter. And that is it for Dropping Dimes. I will see you guys next week with another edition. Enjoy more of the second round matchups. Hopefully we're talking more game 7s by that point, as opposed to look forward to round 3. But who knows? We'll see in the very near future. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe out there. I'll see you soon. Adios.